Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of iGaming Next Weekly News Live. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege today to be joined by my old friend Connor. Connor, how are you doing?
Aren't you lucky, Jake? I know. I'm very well, thank you. I'll tell you what, the absolute sheer funk of place and song. I know I say it every week, but it just gets me right in the mood for a podcast. I love it. How are you, man?
Good. I'm all right. I'm glad to hear you're in the mood today. We're still here, still doing our jobs despite the rest of the industry living it up, either in Barcelona at SBC or on their public holidays in Malta. So we're going to have a short, sharp stream today, I think, Connor, just enough to keep the juices flowing. But we should say that again.
It'll certainly be short anyway. Sharp, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll let the viewers decide. Great to see Bogdan saying hello to us already. Hi, Bogdan. We can always rely on you. The chat is, of course, there to keep it going throughout the stream. So if you do have any comments, questions, insults, amazing praise for me and Connor, feel free to post them in. But yeah, first of all, thank you to our sponsors, Placing, for that funky music, and to Hub 88 as well. So, Connor, it's been an eventful week for the Gambling Commission, which extended a bit of an olive branch to the industry, but then fired some shots at UK horse racing's leading trade newspaper. We'll get to that in a minute. I said it's going to be a short stream today because we don't have Nico taking us about an hour off schedule with his 10 in 5 features. So we'll get right into it. And I don't think it would be right to discuss the regulator without discussing its latest enforcement action. And that came this week in the form of a near £700,000 settlement for Lindar Media, which is the parent company of the online gambling brand Mr. Q, who you might have heard of. So, Connor, you did the deed and wrote this story for us. Do you want to explain to the viewers what happened?
Yes, I hadn't heard of Mr. Q, actually, as it happens, but now I have, and so has all of our readers, because they have been caught up in this regulatory settlement. Yes, as you mentioned, it was just under £700,000. It was, in fact, 690,947. And you know that if the number ends in a 7, then they've really thought about it. It was a bit of a piecemeal kind of settlement, this. It was all little bits and pieces where Lindar Media wasn't quite living up to expectations, but there was no massive regulatory headline grabbing smoking gun in this case. There were a few different things. As we have seen so many times before, we've got failures in the social responsibility and anti-money laundering arenas. Obviously, two big concerns of the Gambling Commission when it comes to overseeing the sector. So the UKGC began a regulatory review of this business in September 2022 after a compliance assessment, and found, yes, insufficient implementation of AML policies and deficiencies in the company's responsible gambling practices. So there weren't that many actually concrete details in this case. I know in a lot of the ones we've had recently, they've told us the stories of lots of individual customers. In this case, it was all a bit broader, a little bit more vague. So the company failed to carry out an appropriate AML and terrorist financing assessment and failed to recognize certain key risk factors among its customers. So there was a couple of other things in addition to that, actually, which was that the head of regulatory compliance at Lindar Media was also occupying other management posts within the business without the regulator's approval. Apparently, that's a no-no. You need to have a head of regulatory compliance who is entirely focused on that issue, not spread about the rest of the business doing other jobs. In terms of responsible gambling, it was said that the triggers used, the kind of threshold rates for identifying customers experiencing harm or potentially experiencing harm, were not always effective. and allowed lots of customers to deposit at high velocity. I think speed would be a more accurate term there. Velocity is speed with a direction. Also, I suppose you could work the direction out of your account and into Lindar Media's. I suppose that is velocity. And yeah, so some customers were able to lose up to or more than £10,000 with no controls to intervene in that process until the money had all been gambled away. The operator also relied on county court judgments and bankruptcy data to identify affordability concerns, which is not necessarily always effective. So a county court judgment here in the UK, if anyone's not aware, CCJ we call them, is what happens when you default on debts and that kind of thing. And it's one indicator that could be used to show that you're undergoing some kind of financial distress, but it's not enough to ensure that your customers are playing affordably on its own. And then there was one more thing which seems like a little bit of an oversight from Lindar Media. So it failed to comply with certain UK advertising codes because there was an advert for the brand posted by an agent, it said. I wonder if that was an affiliate agreement, an advert under an affiliate. And there was cartoon imagery on its website in areas of the website that were accessible to anyone. You didn't have to be logged in to see it. So they found cartoon imagery in that advert and on the website, which were found to be of particular appeal to children. So tread carefully in that area, Lindar Media. So like I say, Jake, it's a bit of a mishmash, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it all just kind of wrapped up to the Gambling Commission saying, yeah, you need to sort that out, really.
Interesting.
700 grand.
Lots of different moving parts there, and you can scan the QR code in the top left if you want to read Connor's full coverage of the story. I have heard of Mr. Q. I remember several years ago now they started as a bit of a challenger brand in the online bingo space, and they did quite well, and I think they got some good proprietary technology, and I think they're even doing TV advertising now. They've expanded into online casino, all this kind of thing. And what was interesting to me was their response to this settlement by the Gambling Commission, because they said perhaps that was an outcome of their sort of rapid growth and came from when they weren't quite as mature a business as they are now. So do you want to elaborate a bit on their official response to the ruling?
I will, yes. But first, did you hear the thunder just now? Did you see the lightning?
No, I didn't.
Autumn has arrived in London. I'm loving it. It's a little bit stormy out there.
Very dramatic.
It was dramatic, yes. Just as you said your thing. It was here we go. Message from the heavens. Okay, so Lindar did respond. Yes, you don't always get that, actually, with these rulings. Sometimes the operators like to keep quiet, but actually Lindar Media did put out a response. It said that none of the failings identified showed any evidence of criminal spending within the company, or that there was any financial upside for the business as a result. Although if customers are losing £10,000 with no checks, that is a financial upside, in my view. But who knows? That's what it said. And the CEO, Savasfella, said that his focus since 2022 has been on maturing the day-to-day operations of the business through the development of the senior leadership team. The business has implemented scalable processes that provide consistency as it grows and built technology-driven models that underpin compliance and safer gambling promises to our players. As you alluded to, Jake, Savas added that the failings identified took place during a period of exponential growth for the business prior to the establishment of its current core senior leadership team, and significant investments have been made in the areas of anti-money laundering and safer gambling. And so the company continues to work proactively with the Gambling Commission to ensure these oversights are not repeated. So there you have it.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Thank you. I did hear the thunder just then. I hope you don't have a power cut and you stay with us on the stream.
Yes, we'll see.
Hello to Michael, who joins us in the chat. Great for you to be able to join us. Connor, so that takes it to 13 fines or financial settlements this year. as well as one license suspension for In Touch Games, which we know now has actually just surrendered its UK license completely. So I've got a question for you. How much does this enforcement action for Lindar Media, what is the new total now for 2023 to date?
Oh, you're asking me to guess because I don't have the answer to that.
I'm asking you to guess. So 13 enforcement cases.
I think it's somewhere in the region of £30 million.
Yep, that's not a bad guess. It's actually more than that. It's 41.5 million now this year. Yeah. Nearly half of which was, of course, that record £19.2 million fine for William Hill back in March. Yeah, so there we go.
That I would have got closer. I might have said 35 if I'd remembered the 19 million mega settlement.
Yeah, exactly. Big one in there for them. 3 million or so for Betfred. But yeah, there we are. Okay, now that story is out of the way. Let's move on to a slightly more explosive one, which is this kind of ongoing clash of opinions between the Gambling Commission and the Racing Post. The regulator has taken offence at the newspaper's reporting on affordability checks, or financial risk checks as they're now officially called, which are set to be implemented following the government's Gambling Act review. Now, Connor, we've got a screen grab here of some of the Racing Post's more recent coverage on this topic. And it's devoted a fair few column inches to this subject in recent months. So some of the headlines here for our podcast listeners: free market think tank questions government's ability to deliver frictionless checks. What else have we got here? There'll be a significant drop-off of customers. Top gambling lawyer warns impact of affordability checks is underestimated. Are there any more in here? Yeah, and ill-targeted... Sorry, go on.
Many will have their joy of following racing changed forever. Suitably dramatic. And yes, as you were about to say, an ill-targeted blanket one-size-fits-all policy. And that's a comment from a Conservative peer, so you know it's reliable and unbiased. So there you have it.
Thank you, Nico. Exactly, there you have it. So, you know, why has the Gambling Commission Chief Executive Andrew Rhodes sort of taken umbrage at this coverage, Connor?
Well, that's a good question. I think the core of the argument of Andrew Rhodes, who wrote all this out in an open letter to the Racing Post and its readers, I think the core contention he had is that he believes the Racing Post effectively is overblowing the eventual prominence of these financial risk and vulnerability checks. So the Gambling Commission continues to bang this drum about the fact that just 3% of accounts would need to undergo financial risk assessments in the UK under the proposals. Further to that, only 0.3%, so a very small proportion, would be subject to checks that are not frictionless. That is to say, most of the people who need to undergo risk checks would do so via a credit reference agency or via open banking data, which means you don't have to log on to your bank and download your statements and mortgage statements or whatever it might be and send them directly to the operator. All you need to do is give your consent, I suppose, to have that background check carried out, just as you would carry out a background check if you were applying for a credit card or that kind of thing. So Andrew Rhodes appears to think that the Racing Post's coverage sort of ignores that fact and makes it look as if the checks, not only are the checks going to be more intrusive and more difficult to comply with than they actually are, I think he's also suggesting that the Racing Post is suggesting that they're going to affect more people than in reality they will. So that's the core of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we published a similar story back in the 7th of September where Rhodes had basically set out to tackle this sort of misinformation, as he called it, around affordability checks at that time. But I think he must have felt it had fallen on deaf ears, and has now chosen to write this open letter to the Racing Post. And I knew I could rely on you to bring up some of the figures and the percentages that Andrew Rhodes is so keen to point out. But former Sky Bet CEO Richard Flint made a really interesting point on X this week, where he basically pointed out, that the Racing Post readership is hardly reflective of kind of society in general, as most of them are, of course, committed racing punters who probably bet far more often and kind of with far higher stakes than your average Joe on the street.
Yeah.
And he says here, obviously the Gambling Commission should have a right to reply, but one thing that makes me very uncomfortable with this response is that a vastly higher proportion of regular Post readers will require checks under the proposals being consulted on. It's disingenuous to cite average percentages without qualification in a response specifically to this group. So yeah, that's very interesting indeed. And he says in that comment there that obviously the GC should have a right to reply. And that was offered again on X by Racing Post editor Tom Kerr, who I think he offered basically Andrew Rhodes the opportunity of an in-depth interview. So Nico, I think we've got another screen grab here. And Connor, if you could just take us through this series of tweets, please.
Yes, so this was the Racing Post's response, and Tom said, "We told the Gambling Commission we welcomed a letter about its proposals, just as we routinely approach it for comment on relevant stories. However, we told the Gambling Commission we were unwilling to publish a letter if it misrepresented disagreements over our coverage as errors of fact." That, Tom said, is precisely what this letter does. It simply repeats contentious assertions from the white paper and consultation without engaging with the numerous concerns raised by Racing Post readers and contributors. In fact, it dismisses those concerns as groundless. And then, as you rightly point out, he ended that thread with the comment that if Andrew Rhodes wishes to communicate directly with Racing Post readers, I would be delighted. I think playing fast and loose with the word delighted there. I would be delighted to sit down with him for an in-depth interview. Who knows if Andrew Rhodes will take him up on that offer? Would you bet on it?
I would suspect not. And it's a shame, really, because Tom, I would have loved to have got on this episode as well as a special guest, because I really would have liked to hear what questions he was basically intending to ask Andrew Rhodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, just to summarize this story, it comes back to, we used imbalanced in the headline, and it's because there's two contrasting points of view here. The Gambling Commission believes its statistics need to be, heard by everybody, and the Racing Post is obviously pointing out that, it has a duty to protect its punter readership and also horse racing as a sport itself, which is likely to, suffer more than any other if there's negative impacts from any sort of online gambling or sports betting regulation that is introduced. As usual, Alan, sorry, go on.
I must say, the one thing, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, Jake. This might just be interesting to you and me, but as an editor, when I read that he'd written the word imbalanced, I had to do some Googling. I thought I would use the word unbalanced, and that would create the noun an imbalance. The word imbalanced doesn't sit right with me one bit, and that's why editors like you and I are so terribly important.
That's right, and I did actually think that whilst the headline popped up on the screen there, I thought surely that's something not quite right, but there we are. We didn't think that enough to remove it from the article, but that is obviously a direct quote from them. Anyway, we digress. As usual, though, Alan Bowden summed up this whole scenario very nicely on Twitter with his usual kind of, sarcastic overview of the situation. I see the Gambling Commission and the racing world is arguing about percentages again. Seems a good use of everyone's time. There we are. Thank you, Nico. Right.
Well, it's nice to see it unfold. If nothing else, Jake, it keeps us interested.
It certainly does. It certainly does. And I think this topic will run and run. And it brings us quite nicely onto our final story involving the Gambling Commission this week.
What about what about, there's another letter we had in response. Do you want to look at that quickly?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Sorry.
We had a letter from the Gamblers Consumer Forum, which I forgot to look up properly before this podcast. And now
that's the beauty of live broadcast, though, Connor.
No,
you can do it right now as we speak.
Googling it quickly. Yes, because it's a purportedly independent body, although I think it probably isn't. But I don't know. I've heard of people who it's funded by and so on, but I'm not actually sure. Anyway, they're very much. I think it's fair to say they're. No, maybe that's not fair to say, so I won't say. So the Gamblers Consumer Forum went back to Andrew Rhodes with a kind of response that was sort of just as bombastic as his letter had been. They said they were somewhat bewildered that you choose to publicly target and vilify the very consumers you purport to represent. So this is their kind of response, is saying, why are you going after Racing Post readers? These are the people you're supposed to be protecting. And I suppose the Gambling Commission would have its own view on that. It said, evidently, you take issue with consumers engaging with you directly, hence why you prohibit comments on your Twitter posts. I think there are probably all sorts of reasons the Gambling Commission prohibits comments on its Twitter posts. So it was just a kind of, I would recommend that people go and read it. If you Google Gamblers Consumer Forum, you'll find the whole letter, because it pulled no punches, Jake. I'll say that much. It kind of pointed out what it saw as a bit of hypocrisy about the Gambling Commission. It accused the Gambling Commission of misusing its own statistics in order to support its own views. So just another string to the bow of this developing story.
Yeah.
Just kind of more people getting involved and joining in the argument.
Yeah, there we are. Then, as Connor said, I would encourage you to seek that out and read it for yourself. I mean, you questioned imbalanced, Connor. I think vilify might not be entirely appropriate, having read the Gambling Commission's open letter. But there we are.
Right.
Yes. And that again is very interesting when we come on to the final story involving the Gambling Commission this week, because ironically enough, it follows the launch of a brand new industry forum, which is designed to basically allow for greater collaboration and communication with operators. So yeah, this surprised some people with the perception, I don't know where they've got this from, Connor, that the Commission is often at loggerheads with the industry that it regulates. But basically it said it wants to increase its dialogue with stakeholders, including operators, including sports bettors, to ensure that an evidence-led approach is being adopted to basically everything they're looking to introduce as a result of that Gambling Act review. So this forum will initially share views on areas including account management, regulatory consultations, the UKGC's ongoing data program, for example. Just a few more details we have on this story. So the regulator is going to recruit a forum chair on a 3-year term, with a search underway from September, which is now. So I'm thinking, Connor, maybe that is why Nico hasn't joined us today, because he's interviewing for yet another job in this industry. Can you see him as the chairman of a UK Gambling Commission forum?
There was me thinking that you were about to suggest I would do a good job of that. But I can imagine Nico doing it, yeah. What we have to do is take each and every point of view, yeah?
You didn't say first of all, Connor.
No, first of all, we have to take each and every point of view from each and every person. Sorry, Nico. I didn't mean it.
Yeah, this is where he never joins us again for weekly news.
He loves it.
He does indeed, yeah. So, yeah, overall, basically around 10 different forum members will be appointed to represent a wide range of gambling interests. I wonder if one of those will be somebody from the Racing Post. I think that's probably unlikely now, although it remains to be seen. Yeah, that's about all there is on this story, to be honest. There's a bit of reaction online on LinkedIn. Nigel Harvey, who's quite a well-spoken AML consultant who often comments on gambling commission rulings, said this is a really positive development. Again, I think it caught him a bit by surprise that they're sort of extending this olive branch, but this is exactly what I think the industry has needed for a long time. And instead of being kind of, the gambling commission versus the betting and gaming council, hopefully there can be a bit more collaboration between the regulator and the industry that it's looking to regulate, basically.
I think it remains to be seen, doesn't it, to the extent to which this is all kind of window dressing and just trying to make everything look nice on the outside, and the extent to which the Gambling Commission takes heed of what the industry has to say. I think there is probably a reasonable argument that many people have been making that the Gambling Commission holds its own views with quite strong conviction. It seems often there's really nothing that people could say to make it change its mind. But like you say, it's a new forum, a new pathway, a new channel of communication between the industry and the regulator. So maybe that will help to smooth things over. But it's, the UKGC's got a very difficult job, big job, doesn't always do it perfectly. But the one thing you can guarantee is that there's always going to be someone to complain about what they're doing.
That's exactly right. And we'll keep a close eye on that forum. Obviously, we'll have the latest news as and when a chair is appointed. So keep your eyes glued on igamingnext.com. Connor, so I think that's a lovely short and sweet half an hour stream there. So those in Malta are probably having a fantastic public holiday in the bars on the beach. Those in Barcelona are probably having their leaving drinks to end the show. What are you going to do after this? Anything as fun as either of those two things?
I think I better go and bring my washing in out of the garden because it's absolutely throwing down out there. But just after we finish the stream, I think we've got a little treat for anyone who was at iGaming Next Valletta earlier this year. We've got our official after movie made by our hotshot videographer and editor, Gian. He's very talented. He always makes top quality productions like this. And yes, why don't you watch along, see if you can spot me and Jake, and see if you can spot yourselves in there as well.
Yeah, we played a starring role, and if nothing else, it will make you want to come to the event 100% next year. So yeah, I think that about wraps us up, Connor. I'll say thanks to Playson again, and thanks to Hub 88 for sponsoring. Thanks to Bogdan and Michael for keeping us company, and thanks, of course, to you for joining me today, Connor. Hopefully, I'll see you at the same time next week. But yeah, Nico, let's run that video.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
iGaming Next, the premier thought leadership event that inspires and enriches the iGaming community. An entertainment industry driven by tech.
It's tech, it's art, it's entertainment, it's Hollywood.
It's about the content, the game.
Plethora of sessions, a sold-out exhibition, entertainment areas, multitude of networking events, and ample space to meet.
In the business of fun and fortune, we must never forget that we're not just spinning reels, we're spinning stories for our players in a responsible way. For all of us, that is the true jackpot.
The only constant in life is change, and this is really happening as we speak.
We're about to change the game, we out here taking names.